Just recently, there has been a lot of coverage on the news about the FBI's raid on ex-President Donald Trump's Lago residence in Palm Beach, Florida. And you need to wonder, what is this all about? What are they really looking for? To find the incredible answer, please join me as we review and we see exactly what the FBI is looking for in Donald Trump's residence. The New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries present the Messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshua, preaching the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God and informing you about world events in the light of Bible prophecy and preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Apostle Yeshua. And greetings, friends. The plain and simple truth of what were FBI agents looking for at Trump's Lago del Mar residence. What were FBI agents looking for at Trump's Lago del Mar residence? The plain and simple truth will shock you. Monday's FBI raid on the home of former President Donald Trump, including his safe, according to Trump, has raised eyebrows and questions about what the search could indicate about a possible criminal investigation into the former president and those around him. The official reason for the raid presented to the media concerned presidential records that Trump removed from the White House when he left office in January 2021, according to Christina Bobb, an attorney representing Trump. But the truth of the matter is that the FBI is looking for something else that is very valuable, classified and top secret information which he has in his possession, which has to do with plans and documents that belong to Nikola Tesla about time travel, secret weapons, and other scientific secrets that Trump's uncle had stolen from him and supposedly passed on to his nephew Donald Trump. What possible crimes could be under investigation? The DOJ has not commented about the raid or investigation. Experts pointed to at least two possible issues that could be under criminal investigation. One would be the federal statutes that concern the handling of classified material, like some of the records recovered from Mar-a-Lago earlier this year. It's a very serious issue when information like this is mishandled, former federal prosecutor Brandon Van Grack told NPR in February, pointing to a federal law that prohibits the unauthorized removal and retention of classified documents. On its face, if these were top secret documents and they were not declassified, then they were mishandled. So let's just take a look at a headline that I got online from NBC News. FBI search at Trump's Mar-a-Lago home tied to classified material, sources say. Miami. Former President Donald Trump said Monday that the FBI had raided his home at Mar-a-Lago in Florida and even cracked his safe, with a source familiar with the matter telling NBC News that the search was tied to classified information Trump allegedly took with him from the White House to his Palm Beach resort in January 2021. Trump also claimed in a written statement that the search, unprecedented in American history, was politically motivated, although he did not provide specifics. These are dark times for our nation, as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida, is currently under siege, raided, and occupied by a large group of FBI agents, Trump said in a lengthy email statement issued by his Save America Political Committee. After working and cooperating with the relevant government agencies, this unannounced raid on my home was not necessary or appropriate, Trump said, before bemoaning, "They even broke into my safe." Trump lawyer Christian Bobb, who said she was present for Monday's search, told NBC News that Trump and his team have been cooperative with FBI and DOJ officials every step of the way. while adding that the Bureau did conduct an unannounced raid and seized paper. But why would the FBI do this? The answers are found in this unique article that I also found online called Donald Trump's Nuclear Uncle by Amy Davidson Sorkin, written on April 8, 2016. In September 1936, a reporter for the Associated Press watched the unveiling of a new kind of X-ray machine said to be able to generate 1 million volts of power. The scientist operating the device was John G. Trump, a professor of engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Trump was working the controls at the time and was explaining how high-speed electrons run along a porcelain tube and then to a water-cooled gold target, when suddenly 2 of the high-voltage sparks hit him squarely on the nose. And yet, according to the AP account, the direct strike caused him only slight discomfort. Professor Trump told the reporter, "That's an advantage of this machine. It's completely grounded and those sparks can't kill you." If only the same could be said of the many woes and troubles of Professor Trump's nephew, Donald J. Trump. He is still uncomfortably close to legal problems, which is why there have been lately more serious attempts to figure out what he might do if, say, he had access to documents and nuclear weapons. In his answers, he seldom sounds as ungrounded as when he invokes Professor Trump, the younger brother of his father Fred. "My uncle used to tell me about nuclear before nuclear was nuclear," Trump said in one interview. Before nuclear, referring perhaps to the development of hydrogen bombs rather than basic atomic bombs, which occurred when Donald was about 6 years old. Or perhaps just to that netherworld where things wait until Trump judges them to be fashionable or flashy enough to exist. He has mentioned his uncle so often and in such extravagant terms, brilliant, one of the top professors at MIT, that it seems worth asking what the professor and his arcane knowledge mean to him. There are 2 different sets of answers, which might be put into the category of foreign and domestic. But first, given Trump's tendency to wrap things in porcelain and gold and shoot sparks through them, it's worth noting that John Trump really does seem to have been a brilliant scientist. He was at MIT for decades, and the X-ray machines he helped design provided additional years of life to cancer patients throughout the world, as the Times put it in his obituary in 1985. Trump was involved in radar research for the Allies in the Second World War, and in 1943 the FBI had enough faith in his technical ability and his discretion to call him in when Nikola Tesla died in his room at the New Yorker Hotel in Manhattan, raising the question of whether enemy agents might have had a chance to learn some of his secrets before the body was found. One fear was that Tesla was working on a death ray, as Margaret Cheney and Robert Uth recount in Tesla, Master of Lightning. Professor Trump examined Tesla's papers and equipment, and in a written report told the FBI not to worry. He said, Tesla's thoughts and efforts during at least the past 15 years were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, but did not include new, sound, workable principles or methods for realizing such results. Professor Trump may have neglected to make that sort of distinction clear to his nephew. What is strange is that Donald Trump couples tales of how he received early secret word from his uncle about a time travel project Tesla was working on, as well as plans to develop a secret weapon that would be able to repel and withstand nuclear radiation, the missing paper the FBI was really looking for. And he said that nuclear weapons were dangerous and getting more so. He would tell me, there are things that are happening that could be potentially so bad for the world in terms of weaponry, he told the Boston Globe, with a casual indifference about proliferation. In recent interviews, Trump has said that if countries like Japan and South Korea didn't want to pay America more for military protection, they should go and build their own nuclear weapons. When in one sewing exchange, Ardenson Cooper asked if this meant he was for proliferation. Trump first disagreed, citing naturally the professor, I hate nuclear more than any. My uncle was a professor. He was at MIT. He used to tell me about nuclear. Trump said, But then he added, can I be honest with you? It's going to happen anyway. It's going to happen anyway. It's only a question of time. Now, wouldn't you rather, in a certain sense, have Japan have nuclear weapons when North Korea has nuclear weapons? Actually, no. It's true that nuclear weapons are not that hard for a determined country to acquire, which is why the best counter-proliferation tool is diplomacy, that is, deal-making, which Trump prides himself on, and yet, in this case, tosses aside. It gets stranger still when Trump invokes the bomb as a way to dismiss talk of climate change. The only global warming I'm worried about is nuclear global warming, he said. Was he thinking of the nuclear winter but got it backward? Or of the heat generated when bombs, which his uncle told him would be nuclear even before there was nuclear end, detonate?
Introducing Apostle Yeshurun's new book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. The answers to life's enigmas, mysteries, puzzles, and riddles. Published author Yeshurun Hetziba brings to the reader in this fabulous work some of the most compelling and thought-provoking subjects and topics that will indeed enlighten you to a superb and amazing sort of compendium of knowledge and understanding, which is also intended to provide the reader with some real and very interesting answers to some of life's most difficult, hard, and intriguing questions. This work explores and will try to bring into light those most basic fundamental explanations to some of the most puzzling and trivial questions that humanity may ever ask about life itself, as well as other enigmas. Everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. You can get your copy at barnesandnoble.com, lulu.com, sweetpublishing.com, and get your copy today. Remember, everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. This book shows you some of the most fundamental things that you never knew and you need to know, like why are you here on this earth? What happens when you die? What's going to happen next? Is World War III going to happen very soon? And many, many other answers to life's most puzzling enigmas, mysteries, and riddles. You need to get this book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. You better get your copy today.
It may be, as is often the case, that looking for the logic in Trump's comments is a pointless exercise, but they might provide an outline, at least, of a worldview. When Trump told the Times that his scientist uncle would tell me many years ago about the power of weapons someday, that the destructive force of these weapons will be so massive that it's going to be a scary world, maybe his point was that the world is a scary place, and that's well suited for a politician like him who traffics in fear. My uncle, I would say my uncle was one of the most brilliant people. He was at MIT for 35 years as a great scientist and engineer. Actually, more than anything else, Dr. John Trump was a great guy. That was followed not by a quote from his uncle about, say, the importance of treating people decently, but by the simple statement, I'm an intelligent person. This is the professor's other role in the Trump rhetorical universe as a sort of eugenic guarantor of intelligence and breeding. Looking at Trump's ideological assemblage, one can see certain common Masonic and Jesuit connectors and traits: fatalism, fear, and social Darwinistic contempt for those who don't do quite as well as he and his family have. Being born rich isn't luck, it's something to congratulate oneself on when one looks in the mirror. The opposite is true of the losers. It's part of what can make Trump feel both like a doomsayer and a smart child. In his rallies, he has taken to giving dramatic readings of the lyrics of a song by Al Wilson called The Snake, which is symbolic of Satan the devil, which he presents As a parable about the dangers of immigration, a woman saw a beautiful snake at the side of the road, almost dead from the cold. She took it home, warmed it up, saved its life, and clutched it to her bosom. Trump always emphasizes that phrase, whereupon it bit her. As she died from the venom, she asked why. "You knew damn well I was a snake," Trump shouts. The world is scary, people don't change, and he hasn't changed either. The missing papers the FBI is looking for. One of the more controversial topics involving Nikola Tesla is what became of many of his technical and scientific papers after he died in 1943. Just before his death at the height of World War II, he claimed that he had perfected his so-called death beam. So it was natural that the FBI and other U.S. government agencies would be interested in any scientific ideas involving weaponry. Some were concerned that Tesla's papers might fall into the hands of the Axis powers or the Soviets, but they have fallen apparently on ex-President Donald Trump instead, and this is why they have raided his home in Florida. The morning after the inventor's death, his nephew Sava Kosanovic hurried to his uncle's room at the Hotel New Yorker. He was an up-and-coming Yugoslav official with suspected connections to the Communist Party in his country. By the time he arrived, Tesla's body had already been removed, and Kosanovic suspected that someone like John Trump had already gone through his uncle's effects. Technical papers were missing, as well as a black notebook he knew Tesla kept, a notebook with several hundred pages, some of which were marked government. P.E. Foxworth, assistant director of the New York FBI office, was called in to investigate. According to Foxworth, the government was vitally interested in preserving Tesla's papers. 2 days after Tesla's death, representatives of the Office of Alien Property went to his room at the New Yorker Hotel and seized all his possessions. Dr. John G. Trump, an electrical engineer with the National Defense Research Committee of the Office of Scientific Research and Development, was called in to analyze the Tesla papers in OAP custody. Following a 3-day investigation, Dr. Trump concluded Tesla's thoughts and efforts during at least the past 15 years were primarily of a speculative, philosophical, and somewhat promotional character, often concerned with the production and wireless transmission of power, but did not include new, sound, workable principles or methods for realizing such results. Just after World War II, there was a renewed interest in beam weapons. Copies of Tesla's papers on particle beam weaponry were sent to Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. An operation codenamed Project Nick was heavily funded and placed under the command of Brigadier General L.C. Craigie to test the feasibility of Tesla's concept. Details of the experiments were never published, and the project was apparently discontinued. But the reality is that Tesla was working on the development of a beam weapon system that could actually resist and repel nuclear fallout and radiation. But something peculiar happened. The copies of Tesla's papers disappeared, and nobody knows what happened to them except the FBI, who now know that they are now somewhere hidden in ex-President Trump's Lago del Mar home. In 1952, Tesla's remaining papers and possessions were released to Sava Kosanovic and returned to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, where a museum was created in the inventor's honor. It was for this museum that Americans later attacked Yugoslavia. For many years under Tito's communist regime, it was extremely difficult for Western Masons, journalists, and scholars to gain access to the Tesla archive in Yugoslavia. Even then, they were allowed to see only selected papers. This was not the case for Soviet scientists who came in delegations during the 1950s. Concerns increased in 1960 when Soviet Premier Khrushchev announced to the Supreme Soviet that a new and fantastic weapon was in the hatching stage. Work on beam weapons also continued in the United States. In 1958, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, initiated a top-secret project code named CISO at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory to develop a charged particle beam weapon. More than 10 years and $27 million later, the project was abandoned because of the projected high cost associated with implementation, as well as the formidable technical problems associated with propagating a beam through very long ranges in the atmosphere. Scientists associated with the project had no knowledge of Tesla's papers. Now they believe that these papers are vital to develop the special beam weapon system Tesla was working on in order to counterattack Russia's invincible missiles like their latest Poseidon nuclear warhead torpedoes that could be armed with a warhead of up to 100 megatons and would create huge tsunami waves full of radiation that would hit coasts of the US. So let's talk about Russia's Poseidon underwater unmanned vehicle UUV. Poseidon is perhaps the biggest game-changing super weapon in the Russian arsenal, as it stands to add another dimension to nuclear deterrence. The Poseidon is an intercontinental nuclear-powered nuclear-armed autonomous torpedo. The weapon's speed is expected to be around 70 knots faster than existing torpedoes, and according to some reports may be even 108 knots, making it uncatchable, while its operating depth is said to be around 1,000 meters, 3,300 feet, thus making it unsearchable as well. Powered by a nuclear reactor, the Poseidon UUV has an unlimited range, affording it new levels of operational flexibility in terms of launch and target locations. It can also be launched from under the ice caps. The Poseidon will be delivered by two nuclear submarines, the K-329 Belgorod, a special-purpose submarine, which is a modified design of the Oscar II class cruise missile submarine, and the Kavarovsk class nuclear power submarines. Each of these submarines can carry 6 Poseidon's UUVs. The Poseidon UUV can destroy aircraft carrier strike groups, CSG, and enemy infrastructural facilities in coastal regions. It will most likely serve in the Pacific Fleet that might pose a threat to U.S. naval bases on the West Coast, as well as key cities like Los Angeles, where there was recent simulation exercises taking place in order to prepare for tsunami waves against the U.S. coastland. Coincidence? No! Experts also suggest that Poseidon may have a seabed or mobile side launch option known as the SCIF. Russian auxiliary vessels Zvezdoka, Project 20180, and academic Alcansadrob, Project 2183, both of which have ice-breaking and thermonuclear radiation capabilities, are involved in the testing of Poseidon UUVs, indicating that these ships may be used as platforms for deploying and retrieving such a seabed version. In the late 1970s, there was fear that the Soviets may have achieved a technological breakthrough. Some U.S. defense analysts concluded that a large beam weapon facility was under construction near the Sino-Soviet border in southern Russia. The American response to this technological surprise was the Strategic Defense Initiative announced by President Ronald Reagan in 1983. Teams of government scientists were urged to turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace, to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. Today, after a half century of research and billions of dollars of investment, the SDI program is generally considered a failure, and there's still no realistic means of defense against a nuclear missile attack like the one Russia plans to use against the US, using their doomsday submarine armed with nuclear torpedoes. For many years, scientists and researchers have sought for Tesla's missing papers with no apparent success. It is conceivable that if Nikola Tesla knew a means for accurately projecting lethal beams of energy through the atmosphere in order to deter the nuclear radiation from Russia's warheads, that this information may have been taken from him by Donald Trump's uncle, John Trump, and now it could be in his possession, I think, and probably this is really what the FBI has been searching for at Lago del Mar. So it makes perfect sense to me that with all the tensions that we're having nowadays between China, who is very close to Russia, and the United States because of Taiwan, etc., and with all of the warnings that the Russians have been giving about a nuclear confrontation, it is very plausible that the Americans are desperate to protect themselves and to create this weapon that Tesla had developed, in order to be a deterrent, to the nuclear arsenal of Russia. It makes perfect sense that the FBI is searching for these documents in Lago del Mar, because they knew that Trump had these documents. So, with that being said, I think I have made it very clear and very thorough understanding of what is really happening in this situation. There is a clear and present danger of a nuclear war on the horizon. And I really pray that I may be wrong, but I know that I'm not. So until next time, this is Apostle Yeshurun saying goodbye, friends.
You have heard the messenger of the Lord with Apostle Yeshurun, preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. For more information on this podcast and this program, you may write us by email at Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. Again, that is Yeshurun, Yeshurun, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. This podcast was sponsored by the New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries, and by the free will offerings, tithes, and donations of those who are listeners of this podcast and are supporters of this great work of God. The preceding program has been a Plain and Simple Truth Ministries presentation.